Boom, there it is.
Oh,
There
I'm
you
about to
go.
say that we ain't even been live.
Boy, shut up, boy. Boom,
I'm
there
about
it
to
is.
say.
Oh, snap. All right. So people about to start jumping in, man. Listen, tell them what we doing the cool.
What's going on, y'all, boy? Welcome to Geechee Sunday. So our first guest is Cinnamon Show. If y'all boy don't know, he's a Gullah scholar at Harvard University. He's the only one out here, who at Harvard, the elite school, you know,
Right.
teaching them boy about Gullah Geechee language and culture, you know. And I want y'all boy to really marinate on that now, because a lot of y'all be like, well, Gullah Geechee ain't really no language. That's just slang. That's just slang. Okay, but if it's just slang, why don't boy teaching at Harvard University? Oh.
I
So
tell you what that is. That's that Negro voodoo language. They ain't want you speaking that. Don't you speak that, boy. Wrong with you.
you know. But we bringing him in, son. This is a cool guy. He from the Chuck. He a native, and he really out here, man. I appreciate him because he out here bringing Gullah Geechee on a higher level, on an academic level, professional level. Because y'all boy be like, well, yeah, y'all can speak y'all Gullah, but don't be speaking that in professional settings. Uh,
Right. We
uh.
gonna speak them. Listen,
Okay,
every time we talk to the son, man, we be learning something new, bro. Mouth be open, breathing hard,
okay, ready
learning.
for the knowledge. Like what?
What? Hungry. Listen, I'm about to go ahead and add our brother in this thing right now. And without further ado, yeah, go ahead, get your camera straight, fella. I can see you. I got you. I got
Go
you.
ahead, get y'all comments ready now.
That's what's up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
what's good? What's
What's
good,
up,
fam?
son?
Oh man, you already
What
know.
going on?
Maintaining.
Right.
Yeah, boy. Wow.
So check them out. We gonna me and Akua, we had a little question for you, whatnot. But people out there, they about to have a question. We're gonna let them go at it. Language
Okay.
related questions only, y'all boy. Don't be getting all fool
Yeah.
up and running off topic. We
Okay,
don't do
don't
the
be asking
tangents.
for
We don't
no
do the
red
tangents.
rice recipe. Do not ask for no
Stay on
red rice
topic.
recipe on this live. We ain't talking about
Yeah.
rice today.
Stay on topic. All
Yeah,
right.
yeah,
So
yeah.
a cool man. Hey, ask son your question real quick, man.
So my question is, if you can break down for them boy the difference between slang and a language, because that's the main thing. But we be out here trying to tell them boy, Geechee is a language. They be like, well, no, it's not. It's just slang. That's just that ebonic slang. You know,
Well,
Why you
the
funny?
thing
that's how
about
them
it,
boy be sounding.
no, one of the well, the first thing about that though is people have a basic misunderstanding of what a language is. Like that's the first
Right.
part is they comparing a language to slang, but slang is a type of language.
Right.
All a language is by definition is a mode of communication, whether by written or speech between people. That's basically a language is just mode of communication. Now it's 12 different types of languages. Now, that's when they start splitting up and dividing as to which one is legitimate or not legitimate. Because that's really the only reason they be having that conversation is because there's a stigma attached to slang that's not attached to language, even though slang is a type of language. If
Right.
if if slang was something that didn't have a stigma attached to it, they wouldn't even be making that comparison. It would just be acknowledged as there's pigeons, there's slang, there's vernaculars, there's lingos, there's patois, lingua francas. There's different types of languages, and not just one. Creole, Gullah is considered a Creole. There's dialects, jargons, all of these things, including some that people hardly ever talk about, like argots and cants and colloquialisms. Like all of these are different types of communication between, and of course, sign language as well. But all these are different types of communication. I don't know how you would be Geechee in sign language, but if I could find, if there's
Hey,
a
that'll be
Gullah,
dope.
yeah, there's a Gullah Geechee sign language out there, I want to get on that, you
Right.
know. But that's the thing is the first part of it all is I want to just clarify that all of these are forms of languages. Drums can be beaten on drums can be a form of language. The original mode of communication is percussion. Okay, smoke signals can be a form of language. You know what I mean? Any kind of code speak It can be a form of language. So all of those things are legitimate in the sense that they're means of communicate. So let's first and foremost not use language as interchangeably with legitimate. So that's the first part. Like, don't use language to mean that this is legitimate. Just use language as a basic definition, as a mode of communication. So now, once we've done that, okay, in regards to what slang is, people sleep on slang, because slang is how we get a lot of the everyday words that start out as casual, informal, formal language. And a lot of those words, like, say, for example, bling, B-L-I-N-G, bling.
Right.
At first time anybody hear the term bling, been with Lil Wayne and Hot Boys
Bling,
song,
bling.
Bling, bling.
Bling, bling.
Okay. Now, bling, bling in a sense is onomatopoeia, in a sense that it is a sound, but it's also like the sound of refracting, of light refracting. Right. But as we know, light doesn't make a sound when it's refracting. But you know how you be watching cartoon, and then when you hear something go like bing, or you know, like that, you know what I'm saying? So two different components came together to create that word, which is the concept of onomatopoeia, and also the popular presentation of light making a sound, bling, when it shines, you know, when a diamond shines or reflects. And so that word eventually, it initially started out as just something that we were saying as slang. But now you can see diamond companies, Jared's, De Beers, all these different marketing ads, because they didn't, you know, he didn't trademark the word bling, so everybody can use it. All these different marketing ads are now using bling as a part of their advertisement for diamonds, when at first that word didn't exist. But yet that is a new word that is now a part of the more common vernacular.
The modern people.
Right. Well, you know how we do. I mean, that's what we do. If it wasn't for us, a lot of things wouldn't be a part of popular culture. Right. And so hip hop, bebop, all of these things, jazz, all of these words used to be slang. Jazz used to be slang. Jazz actually used to be incendiary slang. And we take a lot of those, rock and roll, the term rock and roll, rockin', all of that used to be considered informal language or colloquial speak. And colloquial speak is essentially language that is not relegated, but indicative of a certain culture or a geographical space. Like, people speak that way in that particular area. So I know that if I hear you say a specific word, I'll be like, oh, you from, because that's a word that they only use there. Like, I picked up hella from my West Coast friends. Now, I ain't saying that we didn't say it back home and down south, but something hella good. He said, yo, man, that's hella good. Like, you know, like something hella good. So that's where I picked up hella good from. I picked up God from my New York friends. When they would greet each other, they're like, yo, peace, God. What's good, God? You know, now, you know, down south, we don't really play with God like that.
Right. You can't just be saying, no, who you call it, God? Not my Jesus.
Yeah.
Not my Jesus.
You know, but that became a part of my vocabulary from speaking on a regular with people from that region. And I kind of tell where you're from some of the words that you choose to use. That's indicative of your particular culture or geographical space. Now, what's important about that is, again, going back to the original question, the difference between a language and slang, and now establishing that that slang is a form of language. So now, what are we talking about when we do that? When we make that distinction, what are people trying to establish when they're separating it? Well, what they're trying to establish is the same thing when they dropped the vernacular from African American vernacular English, and they dropped the vernacular and just started calling it African American English. Because contrary to popular belief, linguistics has a lot of room for bias, a lot of room for prejudice and classism and elitism. Like, there's a lot more room in that field for that than what people are aware of. And so connotation means a lot, you know, and just the air of how something comes across, like saying that something is a vernacular or a dialect comes across as it's a derivative, like it's a byproduct of a thing, like it doesn't have a legitimate voice of its own or a legitimate identity of its own. Now, I'm going to tie this into why this is important in regards to the people. So now let's think about it this way. If Gullah itself is a combination of different languages that came together along with English, okay, but a combination of languages that came together for a utilitarian purpose. There was a thing that needed to be done, or an action that occurred where people from different backgrounds, different languages needed to be able to communicate with one another. Okay, what was that thing? Slavery. Okay, that was the thing. When two people get together, two or more languages get together to create a means of communication, that's called a pidgin. So initially, Gullah starts out as a pidgin because if you've ever heard the term Spanglish, like a person using Spanish and English at the same time. Now, it's not so much that they're creating a new language. They're just using different words from each language in different intervals to communicate their thought. And sometimes you can pick and choose between those words. If someone's speaking Spanglish to you, you don't need to speak Spanish in order to be able to pick out the English words and decipher what they're saying. Now, if you keep doing that over a period of time, eventually those people will learn each other's manner of speech just enough to be able to communicate. Now, that's the first thing. That's a pidgin. What happens after that is if that language can survive a generation and they can start to come up with their own rules, then that becomes a Creole. And Creole is the second stage of a language coming into its own. And now what that means is those parent languages have created a child, a kid, or a language that has its own rules. So now just imagine once that language has survived the generation and passed down its own rules, at some point in time, it no longer really makes sense to keep calling it a Creole, in a sense that nobody really calls English a Creole, because you've been speaking it for so long that it's now considered a legit language of its own, despite the fact that English is the most bootleg language of all the languages. English is the most that's the most teething language out of all of them, because English has so many so-called foreign words in it that they're no longer even foreign when you hear them or you say them. So when you listen to Gullah and you say, oh, well, I can recognize a lot of what Gullah's saying because I recognize this word or that word or whatever. Well, I just did a video recently talking about cognates, where there's words that different languages have in common. Well, if somebody is speaking Spanish and Portuguese or Italian and they understand a certain degree of what the other person is saying, does that now mean that Italian isn't legitimate, or that Spanish isn't legitimate, or Portuguese isn't legit, simply because they share enough words for them to be able to understand certain aspects of what they're trying to communicate? And so these languages never have to make these types of compromises in regards of their legitimacy in order to get accepted. Okay, when was the last time when have you ever heard someone say French is a real language, not a slang? They don't do that, because it's presumed that it's a legit language, and you have to ask yourself, by who say that? Right. So I don't. You tell me at what point in time did your vulgar Latin become Romance Latin, and under the Indo European languages, under that umbrella of italic languages, and when they broke off and started to do their own thing in different regions, different parts of the world, and come up with their own rules, to this very day there are certain Latin words that you can look at and figure out what they mean, because there are English words that came from those words that still have very much of the same spelling, very much of this in the same etymology, same context. But nobody says, oh, well, that language ain't legit. English ain't legit. That ain't nothing. But imagine if there's a person old enough to remember the Romance Latin. Like, just say the person thousands of years old, but they're old enough to hear. Now they hear you speaking English. Oh man, there ain't nothing but a Romance Latin there. Them boy, them churn up. They talking all that gibberish. There ain't nothing, man. There ain't nothing but the vulgar Latin there. Okay, but see, now they looking at you like you illegitimate because they've been around long enough to see their language turn into what you speaking. Right. But we don't even have to go that far, because in the United States, the English we speak in the United States It's not the King's English. It's not the Queen's English. The spelling is not the same. When we spell flavor with an O-R and they spell flavor with O-U-R, those two things get to coexist in the same sphere of language. They don't say, oh, that if you say garage and they say garage, if you say jaguar and they say jaguar, they don't correct one another and say, oh, you saying it wrong. No, you saying it wrong. No, you saying it wrong. No, you saying it wrong. They don't do that. Only when we pop up and pronounce things on our terms that are based on the bedrock of our African languages that came together to create this language we speak. Only then do you hear that. Only then are we the ones vying for legitimacy of our language. Even though, trust me, a lot of people may be surprised when they hear me say that Creole, dialects, vernaculars, slang, all of those are just different forms of language. They're all languages. But linguistics, linguists, no. They already know. Right. I can't blame an average person on the street for not knowing something that they didn't really pay as much attention to coming up because that wasn't their focus. And let's face it, a lot of times in these classrooms, these teachers leave a lot to be desired in regards to the curriculum because they haven't made the curriculum feel culturally relevant to you.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And so when you teach in proper English, the whole presentation of the language, and I don't know very many Black people who haven't had this experience. When you were in English and grammar, did you feel like you were learning something that could make you better or improve you as a person? Or were you learning something that you had to in order to adjust to what these people wanted you to do? Like, or what was this something that you felt like, man, once I learn this, I'm going to be a better, smarter, more valuable person? Now, there are things that you can do that with. If you learn a trade, if you learn, maybe math, you can say, man, if I learn math, I can really do something with this. I'll be, capable of motivating in the world and being able to count my money, being able to calculate things, figure out a way to provide for myself even better. Like, these are skills that would help make me a person who can survive better in the world. In these English and grammar classes, a lot of times they were just so casually racist that you didn't even really want to be there. You were only memorizing enough to pass the test if you're lucky, and then just get up out of there.
Yeah. Basically, for real.
Yeah. You see what I'm saying? And the reason being, it didn't feel culturally relevant to you. They weren't able to make it, you weren't able to make it your own. And so once you leave school, man, ain't nobody worrying about no past participles and dangling.
And then them boy make you feel dumb because they be like, oh, well, y'all need to learn this because you ain't gonna get far speaking that Geechee gibberish. Like a lot of little sly remarks some teachers be saying. And to me, that makes a lot of churn shut down. It's like, well, forget you then and it's English class.
But see, here's the flip side.
Negro voodoo language.
The flip side of that, what you're saying though, the flip side of that is, they'll tell you the part, which is true, that if you speak in the Africanized way that you speak going out into society, you're going to run into obstacles. But what they do is they put the blame on you. They put the blame on the way that you speak. They don't say, hey, just so you know, this is a racist society we live in. It's a white supremacist society we live in. There's a lot of bias that you're going to run into, and it's not your fault. And there's nothing wrong with the way that you sound, but your boss may feel otherwise, or your coworkers may feel otherwise. And these people will put stumbling blocks in your way if you are not capable of being able to communicate with them in this particular language, in this particular manner. Now, see, that's a different thing. Because, see, we always put each other up on game. That feels like somebody putting me up on game for my own good. You see what I'm saying? If my teacher put their arm around me and say, look, cuz, you know them bucker going.
The bucker going bucker for real. The bucker
yeah, you know the bucker going buck. You know what I'm saying? Like, you know bucker going buck, man. Hey, bro. So let me put you up on game, man. This is what you're gonna need to know to get through this game. Like, this is what you're gonna need to know. And if somebody do that for you, I would appreciate it. I would say to my English teacher, like, oh, okay, I still could talk like this, but it'd be good for me to be able to switch if need be, because there ain't nothing wrong with code switching in and of itself if it's your choice. If you decide to do it for your own good or your own choice or whatever the reason be, that, you know, knock yourself out if that's what you want to do, because nobody talks the same way all day. When your man call you on the phone, you might sound a little bit different. If you on the phone with your boyfriend and your mama walk through the room, you're like, who that is you talking to? You know, gal, who that is you talking all sweet up over there?
Yeah, put that sexy voice on.
Yeah, you all sweet up on that phone there. Boy, go on for around here. You know, and so they'll know who you talking. You can tell if you're talking to somebody's boss. And you know, we all got our white voice when it's a bill collector or the boss of the job. Like, yes, hi. you know, yes, hi. I'm calling for Thomas. And you know, we all do that, and so it's different when you can tell when your man is a little bit hood, then you kind of get a little bit hood. Like we do that all the time, and so nobody speaks in one particular way 24/7. So you should have the freedom on your own to make your own call, to be able to speak however you want to in certain contexts. And I know that there's a certain thing as professionalism or whatever. You know, you ain't want to be, you know, the weatherman and be like, man, y'all boy, you cool out, John boy.
Hey, though that would have kind of been cool though.
Yeah,
it'll only be cool if he got like Geechee though. If they got like them white news reporters on TV talking about boy, call out your we can riot. We can riot.
You know, but you know, and the thing is though, like you want to make sure that you uphold a lot of the integrity of the language and what the purpose of the language is for. Just remember, more than anything, the first and foremost, you know, purpose of language is communication, to be able to communicate with one another. Once you've achieved that, that's your obligation. When it comes to these rules and regulations and why you gotta do a certain thing and say a certain thing a certain way or whatever, people put those constructs in place for a reason. And remember, we take for granted reading and printing and everything at this point. But at one point in time, only a certain amount of people were able to know how to read, and only a certain amount of, you know, monks and people who are of wealth or whatever would be able to read. And then when the advent of the printing press came along, a lot of the words that were being spoken, that's when those things were starting to be legitimized. It's like the difference between ask and ax. People constantly correct Black people for saying ask, you know, for ax as opposed to ask. Well, it wasn't originally ask. There was always, in different dialects, ax came first or close in line with ask. And whether it's AX or AKS versus ASK, the reason that ask won out is because it was more widely printed. In the version of the text in the Bible, it was more widely printed. So since more people saw it spelled that way, more people started to say it that way. And that became the standard. But standardizing something doesn't delegitimize everything else that is not that thing. It simply becomes the standard for that particular context and those particular people. But acts never went away. And so it's not as though if you say that you're somehow ignorant, or that you're somehow speaking, you know, broken English per se, because English, again, as we've said, is by that standard is a broken version of the language that came before it, is a broken version of the Germanic languages that came before it. And, you know, Middle English, there's even the version of English that we have now wasn't always spoken the way that it is now. And so
what do you call this version right here?
Which this standard, well, see, there's different versions of even this English. Like they'll say like the Queen's English or the King's English, or Common English, things like that. They'll have like even in this English, there's things like such as the Midwestern accent. The Midwestern accent is fake. Well, not fake. Let me take that back. It's not fake. It's just that it's not indicative of a particular like the non-distinct accent. The concept of a non-distinct accent is fake because it is an accent. You see what I'm saying? With many of the German and Eastern European people who came to the Midwest around the turn of the century or whatever, and helped to contribute to the language, the accent of that region, many of their influences remain in that region and went on to become that regional accent. So the idea that there's such a thing as a non-accent in English doesn't make any sense, considering this English is the Johnny come lately of English. This is the accent compared to the ones that came before it. So if in English you're saying, oh, well, people say that all the time. Well, I really don't have an accent. That's your accent.
Right.
Let me put you up on game though.
Put me on game.
When people say they don't have an accent, particularly white folks, what they're telling you is that the way that they speak is the standard.
That's white supremacy in itself. I ain't gonna lie.
I'm telling you, I don't have flavor. I'm just the baseline English. The person who's the baseline is the one that sets the standard. So everybody else is just a version of me, or everybody else is just a flavored version of me or whatever, but they get to be the standard. Now imagine if you say to somebody like, yeah, man, when I crack teeth, I ain't got no accent. When I crack teeth, man, I just be sounding like this, yeah, but I ain't got no accent. The boy would be like, I'm pretty sure that's an accent there, buddy. Okay, then we'll make yours ain't no accent and mine an accent then. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
What a difference. And so that's what I'm saying. It's a lot of really slick, kind of casual racism.
That's that slick racism.
Linguistic. It's real slick and it's subtle. And so when you hear people saying things like proper English or broken,
I cannot stand that word.
Broken English. And so that's the term. The thing is, broken how? Like, in what way is this language broken?
And who fixed them? How you
right.
fix
To me, it's whole the way that we was able to create a whole language underneath that system of slavery. You had a whole bunch of different African ethnicities. To me, we created a whole language. I don't see nothing broken about it.
You know what? That's good that you said, because Gullah Teacha, I want to ask you. So I hear some people say, I hear people say, I hear people say, they say Gullah is the language and Geechee the people, or the other way around. You ever heard that?
Okay. Oh, true. All right.
Can you help me with that?
There's a couple things that we needed. We should establish about that, which is the Gullah Geechee, Cultural Heritage Corridor, or the corridor for short. The region of it is going approximately, the easiest way to remember is approximately from Jacksonville to Jacksonville. Now, of course, it might extend a little bit further, a little bit inland or whatever, but just for ease of memory, just say from Jacksonville, North Carolina to Jacksonville, Florida, inland about 35 miles. And then that strip going all the way down, from Jacksonville to Jacksonville, inland 35 miles, and off the shore into the islands, that's the corridor. Now, if you look at that corridor extends through North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Now, remove Gullah from the equation. Like, pretend Gullah don't exist for a second. Now, just listen to the English being spoken in North Carolina, Georgia, South Carolina, and Florida. Do all of those sound the same? No. In different parts of those states, they got different words that they use, different slangs, different colloquialisms that they use, different sayings, in just the English parts in those states. So when you put Gullah back into the equation and know that Gullah didn't exactly come into existence in a vacuum, that we were interacting with different people who helped to contribute, and by help I use the term loosely because we didn't have a choice in the matter with them helping us learn a bootleg language. And so in that instance, we as Gullah Geechee people have to remember there's going to be times when we use different phrases differently, or the same phrases differently rather, and that's one of those instances. So where we're from, the three of us, in our hometown in Charleston, we typically refer to Gullah as like the people, like we are Gullah. And even though the language is also considered Gullah, like a French person speaks French, it's kind of like that. When we refer to Geechee, we usually use Geechee in a sense like an adjective, like to describe the way we sound or to describe the way we are. Like it's a description, it's more of a descriptor than an ethnic identity. Whereas in, say, Georgia and Florida, they use Geechee often as an ethnic identity and Gullah as the way that they speak. You see what I'm saying? Now, these are the same collective of people with some differences in regards of regional influences. Some areas have a much more indigenous influence because there were people who left certain areas, say for instance, the South Carolinians who escaped from slavery and made their way as Maroons to Florida and had more of a collaborative community with Seminoles and indigenous people who were in the areas. Even before slavery came here, as you know, in the 1600s and the 1500s, 90 years prior, there were enslaved African people who would come here and liberated themselves, made their way into the wilderness, and ventured down into what we now call the corridor, who were living as freed Black people before the haul of enslaved Africans who went on to contribute the bulk of the Gullah Geechee people even came here. Sometimes there's you know, and even in North Carolina, you see like the Black Indians when they refer to in North Carolina.
Yeah.
These are people who are coming from this similar an intersection in our lineage, but some of us have an increased African lineage because we arrived at different times in many instances of different circumstances. Now, I understand that there's a school of thought that the original indigenous people were Black, and I understand that. We've had those conversations. This ain't that. This is a language discussion, so I won't dive into that. But and they'll talk about the Gullah people and different indigenous people in the Geechee River, and they'll say that that's where Gullah Geechee came from, and not the Gullah Geechee in Sierra Leone. That can be debated later, but one thing we know for sure is that the influences of those regions are in the language. And so when people talk about the difference between Gullah Geechee, in a sense, you're really talking about a nuanced difference because these are essentially the same collective of people, but that collective is not a monolith. That's what's important, is even though we are all part of the same collective, that collective is not the same thing everywhere throughout the entire corridor. So you might go to Georgia and their red rice made a little bit different than yours, or you might make, you know, a soup a little bit different than they do in North Carolina. And I was just talking to my man the other day who's from Beaufort, and I made the comment that, you know, people in Beaufort don't sound like Charlestonians. Now, I ain't even saying that in like a shady way. I'm just saying as a literal matter of fact. But you even got to be careful when you're making distinctions between the way that we sound in different regions, because we're so tribalistic in certain ways. We're so used to being pitted against one another, and we're so used to fighting for legitimacy that at some point in time, it might feel like you kind of halfway saying that because they don't sound like us, that they ain't really on our level, or they must be beneath us, or, you know what I'm saying? And you want to make sure that you ain't really adding to that type of time. Like you ain't on that type of time. You want to make sure that they know that. So I'm just, by pointing that out, I'm just saying that we're not a monolith, that we do have diversity in our ranks, even as Gullah Geechee people, that we're not doing the same thing or sounding the same way, because we are people too, and more than anything, geographical differences and elements of different geographical areas go into influence in how we sound and our accents and you know, our lexicon. That influences our lexicon as well.
Right. Even in Charleston.
Yeah,
you can tell somebody.
Right. Even
in
Charleston, you can tell with some. Right. And even in the matter, what's funny about that is, I distinctly remember going downtown, and then, boy, let me get your country. He said, boy, man, this is a country, man. They call you country in a heartbeat. You know what I mean? And Bama and country. And that's the city boy that'll do that to you. And so that's the thing. I remember when I was little, and my mom had been taking me downtown, and I had seen these two little children at the soda machine, and they're putting money in there. They've been disagreeing on how much money go in the machine. And they said, hey, man, hey, put a quarter in there. He said, boy, you got to put 50 cents in there. He said, no, I say he ain't nothing but a quarter, man. Put 50 city, 50. He said, he a quarter, man. He 25, man. And I said, Mom, what I'm trying? I said, Mom, what I'm trying arguing about? What they fussing for? And she tell me, but you know, they fighting over money to put in the thing. And I remember thinking, what they say 50 for? What they say footy? You know, and some people say footy, some people say 50, some people say 50. Depending on what, right there, right. Some people say orange. Then, you know, some people say orange, some people say orange. You know what I'm saying? But they're both saying orange. And so you can tell what part of town somebody from in Charleston from the way that they talk. And that's no different than we are in parts of Africa, where you can tell where they speak. There are lots of languages being spoken in a small space, small geographical space. You can kind of tell by the way that somebody speaks, what tribe they're from, what region they're from, what their background or whatever. And that's just something that has always been with us culturally. But more than that, we are, depending on the population, if in Charleston is black, a lot of black people in Charleston. We were at downtown was like at one point in time over 50%, you know, black. Of course, gentrification taking care of that.
Not in Southern Charm white up. You think ain't no black people living downtown, but that's another conversation.
Right. And so when you are in an area where it's predominantly black, you don't really have to do as much code switching. You don't really have to change the way you talk so much,
right?
Because a bunch of people sound just like you do. And so different Gullah Geechee people, where the Gullah Geechee people who live in areas where they're the vast minority, might pick up a little bit more of that twang, might pick up a little bit more of the regional language, to the point where when I see a video, I ain't gonna say who it been, but I see a video where somebody is say, oh, they post a video, their grandma speaking Gullah. And then when I listen to it, I shouldn't even say grandma, because now I know people could go looking for it.
But you ain't doesn't know. You just trying to make a point.
Right. Is when I hear it, it sound like my grandma. You know what I mean? So it sounds different. And I said, man, Gullah, you know, that sounds different. You know, so. And that started me on my path to say, wait a minute now, if this Gullah where they from, what is Gullah where they from? And different people, like, you know, what that mean in different areas or whatever. And that's when I realized, like, okay, well, you know what? I know in Chucktown we be thinking that the whole, you know, the whole universe, the whole Gullah universe surround us. But that ain't true. We got to be more open to being more receptive to the fact that other regions of the Gullah corridor is just as legit as us. They just got different influences and everything in their language. Now, I will say this, collectively speaking, there is a thing in regards of, like, people will say, well, is Gullah a race? And Gullah's not a race. Gullah's an ethnicity. But, okay? And I know y'all know why.
Because them black people finna jump over and be like, oh, yeah. Them boys finna jump
Gullah race, play.
So I know what you about to say. Okay, now there's two ways to look at this, okay? Well, it's more than two ways, but I'm going to break it down to 2 ways. Okay. Gullah is an ethnicity. Gullah Geechee, that's an ethnicity, all right, and not necessarily a race. But there is a racial component. There's a racial correlation, okay? Because culturally, the correlation has been that Gullah is the language of formerly enslaved people, that we created under conditions of slavery. And again, I don't want to get into a history debate with anybody else out there about the full, somebody probably bugging in the comments somewhere out there, I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah, them boys say we the Hebrews, we the real Jews, Israel.
Hey, look,
man, go on with that, man. Go ahead.
Look, I ain't got nothing to say. I ain't even gonna touch that. I ain't gonna touch that. Yeah, I ain't even gonna touch that. So I'm gonna stick to the script. And So, in regards to the narrative of Gullah Geechee people who are of African lineage, okay, culturally speaking, the language came about as a combination of these different languages. To this day, a lot of the things that are considered broken about our language actually harken back to Yoruba and Igbo and Efik, and the languages that came up. We held on to a lot of that grammar. So if we use things like to correlate, to conjugate time and excuse me, for a verb to convey time, and how we talked about, well, in my last video talking about verb tenses in order to be able to tell when a thing occurred. And somebody say, I've been telling them that, but that been is going to be something that we carried over. Our E, the way we use E for a person, place, thing, event, E can be anything. It can be a baby, a car, a time, a funeral. If I say, hey man, you have been to the funeral? Hi, yeah, I've been there. How the body look? He looked good. Well, how the service been? He been good. How the food tastes? He had tastes good. He had tastes good. His wife been there. Yeah, he been there. So in that one conversation, he done turned from the dead body in the casket, the funeral, the food, the wife. He done been a whole bunch of stuff, and that is again carried over. If you hear someone speaking in a West African pidgin or Nigerian pidgin, and they say something about "they go," or where you they go, in that sentence we use "the" as well. They may refer to it as "they," but we may say "the," but it is used the exact same way. "G" is used the exact same way. I go do this, or I go, I go chop, as opposed to I am going to do this thing. Or I could chop your behind. You don't sit down like that. It's the same thing in same verbiage, same use. Now this also transfers over to the Atlantic Creoles and Bahamian Creole English and Barbados, Jamaican Patois. All of these things are things that we have in common, and that's not a coincidence that all these Caribbean languages in this Gullah in the States have the same basic structure that is overlaid over a grammar that is not English. And so that's why it sounds broken to a natural, to a normal like English speaker, is because we are rearranging word order to accommodate our African grammar, as opposed to the more European grammar, as opposed to the more anglicized way of speaking. We're doing a more Africanized way of speaking. And so it's not broken, it's just different from what you know to be the standard of the way that the mechanics of your language. And so if we can make something past, present, or future without changing the verb at all, without modifying the verb, and that right there is like walk. Hey, where Chris went? He walked to the store. You know, see what I'm saying? Chris about to walk to the store. You know what I'm saying? What he doing now? He walked to the store. He'll walk to the store. If I say, oh, he'll walk to the store now, that means he's currently right now walking.
I'll be like, hey, where you getting into? I don't walk to the store.
Yeah,
but you actually walk into the store.
But you're actually walking to the store right now. If you go walk to the store, then that's something you're going to do in the future. If you usually walk to the store, then you do walk to the store. I don't walk to the store all the time. And so in that sentence, people say, oh, well, if you don't change the verb, like how do you even know if it's past, present? Man, come on now, quit playing. Didn't I just tell you? Don't act like that. Don't act like this baby talking to no system.
And I feel like, and that's the beauty in our language, because like even a term they can pick it up. Because I feel like a lot of our language, you got to listen to the context clues to figure out what the hell we saying. And and I guess that's why people who are not like within the culture, they be like, what did y'all talking about? But even low turn, they can pick it up. Like they know what we talking about.
You know what the flip side of that is, there are a lot of people who do understand a lot of what we say based on putting together the context clues, and they feel proud of themselves that I can understand it totally. I get it, but they don't understand that there's levels to this language.
Right.
Okay. The first and foremost, you being able to understand it. If you don't speak Gullah and you're able to understand the language, that doesn't make it illegitimate or not a so-called foreign language. we're so used to associating foreign languages with languages that we don't understand that it never has occurred to us that there may be so-called foreign languages, and I say foreign and because it's all relative, there may be so-called foreign languages that you that you actually do understand, but that doesn't make them any less a different language. And I say foreign in quotes because, well, what is the official language of this country? Like every language is foreign, including English. English
Okay,
isn't
for real.
indigenous. You know what I'm saying? English isn't indigenous to this language. Matter of fact, the irony of them making Gullah exclusive and like excluding Gullah rather as a legitimate language in this country is Gullah is indigenous to this country and more American than English is. English was brought over here whole. So if anything, the irony is the Africanized language that we speak, even in all of its Africanness, is still more American than the English that you speak and use to delegitimize my language, in the sense that it is indigenous to this country. Now, that's not to say that all the ingredients of the language came from this country, but this is where the part came together. You see what I'm saying?
Right.
This is the part that it was all the ingredients came together in. So if you making soup and you get your corn from over there and your celery from over there and all these different things from there, your crab from over there, you can't say that that's soup from all them different places. The ingredients from all them different places, but the soup is from the pot where you cook it in.
Hey, so question. So Jacob, you say Gullah Geechee is more American than most languages, right?
Oh,
than
yeah.
English is.
So I can tell them boy to stop speaking that standard American thing and start speaking their Gullah.
They need to go back to where you come from. Yo, boy, you know what I'm saying? You know, speak Gullah. You know, can you imagine that? Like, you know, if telling them, man, come on, this is America, speak Gullah. Like nobody does that. But see, that's the thing is at the end of the day, there are so many different, now more than ever, the importance of Gullah, not just Gullah as a language, but Gullah as a concept, Gullah as an heirloom, as a thing that we've been able to pass down from generation to generation to identify ourselves, our culture, our people collectively. Now, I will say that sometimes there's a misunderstanding in regards of people will say, well, are all black people Gullah? No. Okay. Right. That you not all, just Gullah doesn't mean black. Okay. Even black don't mean black. Like the only reason we're calling ourselves a race right now is because white supremacists created that system and labeled us black and put us at the bottom of that system. So race itself is not a scientific thing. Race doesn't have like a biological element, or it's not a legit thing in that regard. We freeze up. Hey, y'all boy can see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
I look the same.
Yeah. You straight.
Okay, well, my camera, my camera frees up. So if something happened, then
at them iPhone, man, you gotta get a real phone, man. At them iPhone, man.
Man, go ahead. So that's the thing is that over the course of time, like you have to know that there's going to be a fracture in the community because we're being dispersed and displaced all over the place, and even though something like 1/4 of the black population, 1/4 of the generational black population, like they not people who moved here, like African Americans, generational African Americans, came through like the port of Charleston, came through the corridor, and therefore there is that connection to the corridor generational. But when those people were dispersed to different parts of the country, and the people who were left on the barrier islands, and the people who were left in the low country, and dispersed to the Bahamas or whatever, in different parts of the Caribbean, in those locations, specifically in those areas, those people created their own culture. They created their own way of speaking, their own way of doing things, but each area carried their Africanness with them. Right. So it's important to make sure that we note that saying that not all African Americans are Gullah doesn't strip away African Americans' Africanness. You see what I'm saying? So you could have gone all the way to Mississippi, Alabama, and outside the corridor and still carry your Africanness with you there, or to Louisiana and create the Creole culture there. So making a distinction between these groups of people is not divisive. That's not divisive, because the idea that we are one monolithic, solid group of people is ironically racist. We didn't come up with that idea. It's ironically, there's a difference between solidarity and homogeneity. Okay?
Right.
We don't have to be the same to be on one accord. We don't have to engage in tribalism in order to celebrate our diversity within the Black America, within African American community, the generational African Americans, within the Gullah community, because that's the thing that they're not taking into consideration oftentimes when they feel like someone will say something like, Gullah Geechee people have managed to preserve more of their Africanness than virtually any other subset of the African American community. And people will say, well, that's not right, or that's not fair, that's not cool, and feel like it's an insult to other people, but it's not. It's not an insult, because it's not a zero-sum game. It doesn't take away your Africanness to point out that these people here still subscribe to very many of the traditions and foodways and practices and different things that were carried over than what is prevalent in other areas of the community in different parts of the country. Those two things can coexist at the same time without one taken away from the other. And so we have to do two things at once. We have to embrace more of our diversity in the way that we speak, in the way that we worship, in the way that we socialize. Embrace more diversity and understand that Jacksonville is just as Gullah Geechee as Sepulveda Island, as Charleston, as you are in Wilmington and different parts of North Carolina. Like, these are all places these Gullah Geechee people hail from. You do not have to be from one of the barrier islands in order to be like, so for some reason, some people put it out there that you have to be from one of the barrier islands in order to be legit. So people living literally across the bridge ain't as Geechee as you, ain't as Gullah as you, because they weren't in that particular geographical space. That's not true. That,
right.
First of all, doesn't even make sense. That's not true.
Kind of
so
funny,
how
because everybody used to get mad whenever you say you Geechee. What you go in the house with your Geechee behind.
Exactly, and there's a lot of people who still hold on to that. But now that we have more people doing more things to represent the culture in ways that I guess resonate with people as respectable, now it's popping in the street, and everybody want to be Gullah. Everybody want to be Gullah Geechee, But it's hard to sell that to people who grew up with it being a derogatory term. People who grew up with it being, with Gullah and Geechee being synonymous with, country or crude or ignorant, uneducated.
And that be my biggest beef with like these Bucker owned companies that be using it and trying to be like, well, I thought Geechee Gullah was just a term for low country. No, you knew better. And like, we ain't get bullied all our life just for y'all to be stealing our name now.
Right. And so the thing, my beef with that about people taking the name and you doing with it what they will is, it's not just a question of cultural sensitivity, but if in the event that you wanted to do Navajo grits, if you wanted to do, Apache Cafe, now you can do that, and people do that. But it's really cool if the reason that if the branding is giving people the false impression that you're actually Comanche, or that you're actually Seminole, or that you're actually Cherokee. And even if you're not trying to fool anybody, like say, for instance, you know, the Seminole as a football team, as a college football team, whatever, even if you ain't even trying to fool nobody and to make it believe that this is actually owned by these indigenous people, did you get their permission to take their name? What kind of cut are they getting from it? You know what I'm saying?
They love doing that.
Right. And so
What
that's
them
what I'm saying
boy claim that they paid a Gullah Geechee person. This be the other thing. They feel like they can pay 1 or 2 Gullah Geechee people that they know it, like pay, I guess, pay their culture appropriation fee, and then that mean them boy can just run with it and do whatever they want with Gullah Geechee. All they gotta do is pay a culture appropriation fee.
And so here's the thing, though. If somebody say, okay, if we talk about cultural appropriation, then y'all gonna pay George Lucas for that Gullah Wars shirt. First of all, mind your business. That's the first part. If George Lucas want to come and come after y'all for Gullah Wars, then he gonna have a long way to go, because how you gonna patent something that come before Star Wars ever existed, before this country was this country? Gullah Wars come before Star Wars. He said, oh, but what about the font? First of all, ask yourself again, and these y'all rules now, is this font protected? Is this patented? Is this, did you take a close? Don't make me pull a McDowell's on you.
Hey, what you think? We could just be out here grabbing up everybody's font and playing around with everybody thing? No, man.
See, here's the thing: is you got to take into consideration the fact that, number one, as intelligent business persons, we know what we're doing in regards of branding, and secondly, is that a culture? Is that really a culture? Is that something that you can say? Now, if you are walking around with Chinese letters, tattoos, or whatever, and things like that, using somebody else's culture, and that's cultural appreciation. But now when you decide to go take a business or take a village and an ethnicity of people, use their font, use their language, and represent yourself as a business on these people's behalf, now you're engaging in deception. You see what I'm saying? And the reason that I brought that up is, number one, that's that hoodie hard and I want one. But number two, because you know, because people get these things confused, and they always try to figure out a way to turn the table and play this game as to make it seem like it's even Steven, like, oh, but y'all do it too. Well, here's the difference. Okay, there's a big difference between people who have to adjust and adapt to circumstances in order to survive versus people who just teeth it in order to take advantage of the people who they've oppressed. You see what I'm saying? And one of my movements, one of the things that I like about what y'all do is it includes the graphic design. I think I told y'all that when we first spoke, you know, in regards of, you know, what's working, and to emphasize that, because, you know, having your own logo, having your own watermark on the, you know, on the screen right there, you know, and having the hoodies and having product is a part of keeping the culture alive. It ain't just keeping the language alive, but it's also keeping the creativity. It's also keeping all of the things that we do, because, okay, so silk screening shirts is not the same tradition as palmetto roses and baskets, but it is a part of our culture. It is a part of our creativity that has got to be folded into it. Graphic designing, all of those things got to be seen as representations of our culture. We got to bring them all into the fold. Don't be limited to just the things that we've done as services for other people in the cuisine area. They take our food, they take our basket, they take our painting, they take something that they can have in their hand and walk away with it and use it as their own, appropriate it as their own. There'd be people who buy a basket and then resell the basket for 2-3 times the amount in their part of town.
But wholesaling basket.
Right. I mean, they'll pay. If you charge them $200 for a basket, they'll pay the $200 and then go sell it for $600.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? And so
they give them a little story behind. They give them a little story with the basket, and bam, $600.
or they'll probably even take a picture of the old black lady that did to take the thing and sell them and get more money for the picture too, and get more money for the picture. You know, but see, that's the thing is, and I want to be clear that what we're talking about is just modern business strategies and commerce, and being able to get in the game and make use of this thing that is our culture, that in order for it to still exist, in order for us to still be having this conversation, for us to still have this accent all these years later after our relatives were brought here against their will, okay, that took generations of people getting spit on, generations of people getting discriminated against, generations of people getting turned down. I mean, how many generations of people who in their own community couldn't even come courting the gal because they ain't talk right, and the parents ain't want their child to blend with somebody who didn't have upward mobility in their opinion. You see what I'm saying? And so there's a lot of sacrifice that went into us still being able to sound like this. And so when we are keeping, and that's whether it's, this ties into the point that I was making about us being able to let them understand us. They understand us if we want them to. When it's Accolec, Mesolec, and Baselec Gullah. If we speak in Accolec or Mesolec like we're doing right now, then sure you're gonna understand everything we're saying, because we ain't even trying not to be to be misunderstood. But if we get really, really deep in the thick of the Gullah and start speaking the most Baselec form of the language, then Katie bar the door. That's a done deal.
They ain't gonna know what's going on.
And so that's what I say. And so for us to still have that this long in the game, this far, this deep in the culture, all these years later, after slavery, after Reconstruction, after Jim Crow, and all the different things that have happened to us, for us to still have the dexterity and the longevity and the way that we speak is a miracle. And that's something that's worth preserving. And in order for you to be dastardly enough to presume that you can just make use of that when you feel like now that it's popping, to me is something that's predatory. That's every trait of a vulture.
It is. A lot of them boy be preying on the culture, but I ain't gonna call them boy. I ain't gonna call them boy out for a different conversation.
Don't call them out. Hey, so I mean to slice that boy off, but we right at an hour, right? We got 2 hours on this thing. Check them out. Okay. I tell them boy get their mouth ready for the question. So hey, son, I'm gonna pick out a couple of questions in here. I'll give you one. And then you can just take a couple minutes on them, boys, so them boys don't be crying and whatnot. That's my question, man.
Yeah.
Hold on. I think I see one just now. That
You tell me that one about Native American? That's the one I see right now.
No, this one right here. Boom. Do you recommend trying to teach others to speak or understand Geechee?
And I think I know who others is.
The Buckra.
I think that context is everything. I think that first and foremost, I can look dirty if I say no, and that's what I do for a living. So I ain't gonna be like, nah, man, y'all boy flam. No, I ain't want nobody else teaching nobody nothing. So I ain't gonna say that. But context is everything. I met a young brother who makes palmetto roses, and he was teaching another kid how to do it. And the kid that he was teaching was white. And that's his man though. That's his boy.
He been mixed or he been white?
Even white. Even white. Now here's so now, and this is going to tie into the answer to the question. Right. There's two ways that this went down. Okay. In one instance, and he told me the story. I don't want to put him out there, but because I didn't ask him to tell the story in this platform. But in one instance, he was ran off the block from selling the flowers in front of a store that was owned by his friend parent. And later on, he come back around and see that his friend parent was allowing her son that he taught to make the roses to sell the roses in front of the store. She ran Okay, that's the scorpion and the frog. Okay, in situations, we can sometimes contribute to our own demise because we got a good heart. And this
Heart too good.
this was him just really trying to be a good friend and share his culture with somebody who ended up stabbing him in the back. Okay,
backfire on him.
now in a different scenario, there was a different situation. Same kid. There was another person, the one that was with him when I met him, and that person was also white, but going through a mental crisis at the time. You could tell they were really going through a lot. And he was really talking to him and trying to build him up and using the rose as a means of distracting him to kind of get his mind right. He was really doing a great service for that kid. And he used the rose as a means of communicating and showing him how to do it. That lifted his spirits. You could tell that that kid was not going to be out here selling roses on the block like the other one did. He utilized that, like his culture in that moment, to really lend a hand out and help somebody that was in need. And in that moment, I thought, like, wow, that's dope, especially when he later told me the story about the other kid that stabbed him in the back. And so he was still able to hold on to his culture and share it with a person who saw value in it and wasn't trying to take it, unlike the other person who was predatory. So my answer to the question of should we teach others the language is context is everything. We are academics and it is a language. And I think a part of the reason we are reluctant to share the language is because of how the language came into existence. In many instances, we've always had two levels of the language. There's the one that we spoke to them and the one that we spoke amongst ourselves. And we had to be able to speak around them and over their head at the same time in order to be able to pass, you see what I'm saying? In order to be able to pass code back and forth to one another for freedom and survival, we had to be able to communicate with one another. So there's a lot of Gullah Geechee people who have concerns that if we teach them the basics of our language, they'll be able to steal our code or co-opt our voice. But that horse lead the barn a long time ago.
He really did. When them boys started teaching us.
They've been to that. See what I'm saying? Is generations ago, them boy been. When you look at minstrel shows, blackface minstrel shows or whatever, they've been Jim Crow, up jump Jim Crow. Like, you know, that's the character. Right. They've been trying to take the way that we sound and create Disney flicks, old Tom and Jerry. Yeah. If you listen to Tom and Jerry, Thomas, you get down, y'all. I'm gonna knock your tail up if you don't get down, y'all. You know, they've been exploiting our language and taking bits and pieces of it, using it in Disney films. A lot of people don't even know that Uncle Remus is supposed to be Gullah. Right. Zippity doo dah, hey there, bro, rabbit. Like all of that, they've been doing it and co-opting it and using it and calling it Southern. And there's a generic sort of slave talk that they use, like a slave lingo. And I usually refer to the people as enslaved and not slave, but I'm referring to this dialect that Hollywood created, this slave dialect that is very generic version of Gullah. You know, oh, Miss Charlotte, I don't know nothing about birth and no babies, you know, all of it. And at the same time, like, you know, baby, BB, BEBE, you know, that's us, you know, and using those so-called double negatives or whatever, that's from us. And, you know, I studied you a lot of the way that we pronounce certain things. Those things are hijacked. They were stolen from us. So that's already been out there. So now we got two choices. Well, more than two choices, but let's just say we can either let that be what they believe we are, that we can let that be the representation of what we are. Because remember, you watching the same cartoon, you watching the same Disney flick. So little black kids are also seeing themselves represented in the media and seeing themselves misrepresented in this way, thinking that's how we speak. Why? Because too many of us don't even speak the language in front of them, and we are literally beat it out of them in order for them to have upward mobility in our community. So the only time they even hear it, for the most part, is when it's being misrepresented through the white lens. And
So that's good. That's good. You said that you talking about getting the Geechee beat out of them. You think that that's kind of going away, you know, taking away the whole don't talk like that. I don't want to hear y'all
That
talk like
ain't it. That still happening in them schools. Them teachers, cause like for Black History Month, I did a whole poster. My wall, you know, people decorate a little wall. It highlighted Gullah Geechee words. I threw in, you know, regular African American lingo too. And you know, a couple people was upset. Not everybody, but it was a few parents, you know, they feel like, well, I don't want my children learning anything about Gullah Geechee. And to me, that could be trauma. You know, maybe their mama got beat for speaking it. I don't know. But even to this day, you still got people who feel like you know, that there's that Geechee and professional or Geechee and successful can coexist together. Like it's two opposites.
I asked, to give you an idea how ingrained that mentality is, I did a poll on Twitter and then copied it over to Instagram. And I asked specifically of the people, have you ever been complimented? And it's particular Gullah Geechee people and speakers of Black diasporic Creoles. In other words, Creole languages that were created by Black people in colonized spaces. That's not like Swahili or something like that, like languages that date back. Like that's not a Creole, but languages that came about in those colonized spaces that became Creoles. And I ask everybody specifically in the poll, have you ever been complimented as articulate? Okay, like you speak so well for your mother language, not English, or your accent by a non-Black person. All right, that's the question. Have you ever been complimented as articulate for your mother language, not English, if you speak as your first language a Black diasporic Creole? Okay, if so, by a non-Black person. If so, who and in what context? Virtually everybody responded saying, yes, I've been called articulate. And what they were referring to is they've been called articulate for speaking the King's English. Almost everyone misread the question because it's like their brain didn't catch. No. I mean, did you get called articulate for your Gullah, for your Patois, for your Creole? Like, that's what I'm saying. I'm not asking you, did you get called articulate for the way that you've mastered the English language? I'm saying, did anybody ever hear you sound like this, Sean, and say, oh, wow, you sound so articulate. You speak so well.
Because them boys still associate that with being, you know, with being ignorant.
Well, some people will say, oh, yeah, I've gotten complimented. People love, you know, my Haitian Creole or my whatever. And I'm saying, wait a minute. Again, I don't mean sexy. I don't mean exotic. I don't mean in that context or whatever, or cool. I mean eloquent. Did they compliment you as being articulate and eloquent in your language? No, because no matter how much you master Gullah, you can be the most proficient Gullah speaker on every level, Mesolek, Baselek, Acrolek. Nobody's ever going to call you articulate for that. You see what I'm saying? That's not the word that they're going to use when referring to the way that you speak. They're going to call you a whole lot of things, but articulate ain't one of them. Because you don't associate eloquence with that manner of speaking. And so that is a subconscious mind game, because those adjectives go on to determine how the speaker is perceived, not just the language that they're speaking.
Right.
You see what I'm saying? So ultimately, I do suggest sharing our language in the context of we do have other educators, yourselves, And people, I mean, that's what you're doing. Your first video that went viral was sharing the language. And surely you know that all that million views ain't come from a million of us.
Some of them
See
mad
that?
up now.
Yeah, you know.
They be mad up.
And,
Oh, y'all giving away the sauce. Sauce been given away.
Right.
No boy been at it.
Right. And so that's the thing is what we're trying to do is fight we want to fight the narrative that, like, say for example, when people eat pizza, okay, nobody's denying that spaghetti and meatballs or whatever is of Italian, origin. Nobody says when they're eating, croissants or whatever, that's not French. That, enchiladas or tacos or whatever. Like, there are things that are able to be shared with the world, but the world still acknowledges where it came from. When it comes to oppressed people, historically oppressed, colonized people of color, Black people and other people of color, it's not a sharing. And it ain't no appreciation. Yes, a cultural appreciation does exist. That is a thing in the dictionary. In reality, it's appropriation, because that's how it usually ends up working out. Because you're not trying to, taste or get a little bit and just, that tastes good. You know what I'm saying? Can I have me some of that? But some people you can't share with, because this shit mean, yeah, let me get that.
Right, them boys are
that's the, you about to get debo. So that's what I'm saying is, there's some people you gotta have discernment. You have to have principle and think of the greater good, because there's some people who took exception to me teaching the language at Harvard without even know who I was teaching at Harvard, which is besides the point. But then turn around and don't say anything to tour guides, like people who teach all comers. If you are in a vehicle of some kind, doing a tour through the city, pointing out different things about the culture and giving Gullah lessons of the language to whoever, unless you got a Black only, a sign on the door that say Black only. In fact, for that matter, even if it is Black only, all them people ain't gonna be Gullah Geechee. So you gonna still end up giving away parts of the culture
sauce.
based
You're
on your
giving away the sauce.
And so my thing is, think about it. Imagine who gets to make that call? Who's the gatekeeper? Who gets to tell you that you can't make use of your culture as a means of coming up in this world? Remember, we may be Gullah ethnically, but we are still Black in a white power construct. We are still disenfranchised. We are still subjected to unemployment at a disparate number, at a disparate rate. We are still subjected to being the mass incarceration, opportunities lost. We're still subjected to all of those things. And there are many of us who have been put in situations where we cannot be gainfully employed, and we've been cut out of the mainstream for whatever the reason may be, whether it's education, whether it's criminal record, whatever the thing may be. And having this culture is providing a new lease on life, is providing opportunities for us to be able to provide for ourselves, legally, ethically, morally, culturally, in a way that is upstanding and a good thing. And then along comes a gatekeeper that tells you got to kiss their ring and pay them a vig before you can make use of your own culture in order to survive and feed yourself. No. This ain't Kung Fu where, Bruce Lee teaching Kung Fu to the Guaylo, and now y'all gonna send a Gullah Geechee sensei to come fight me in my yard.
Yeah.
We ain't doing that.
The Gullah Bushido bleed.
Yeah, right. we ain't doing that. We ain't doing that. And so the thing about it, now, don't get it twisted. I have all the respect in the world for elders and everyone that came before us, and even gatekeepers in the sense of respected elders and people who have really, really sacrificed and paved the way and held the gate together to keep, you know, intruders out and keep our cultural artifacts in. I do respect that. But at the same time, what I want more Gullah Geechee people to know is this culture is here for you to make use of it, to do more with it, to advance yourself in this world. Now that, that there are more eyes on us and more opportunities for us to make use of this culture in some way, shape, or form. And we're going to debo whoever ain't down with the program that is not one of us trying to steal our identity. I ain't going to call no name because some of them done changed their name, so I ain't going to put my foot on, I ain't going to hold them. But if been a couple of people that had to be it been a couple of people, they had to get run out the game now. And so that's
But
why I said
speaking of identity, because some of them will keep asking this question, so I feel like they really want to know. They want to know, did Gullah Geechee people hold on to any of Native American culture?
Yeah.
I don't know how to identify that outside of the Seminole, which is really Gullah Geechee people. I feel like then we influence each other since we linked up with them. And the first black people that come over here first people that came to America was black. Didn't we kind of teach them?
I think that, okay, well, first of all, the thing that we have to take into consideration is that, well, there's a couple different things here. Is not even the indigenous people to this land are a monolithic group. That's not one group of people. So we tend to use the term Indian or indigenous as a catch-all for the people who are here. Okay, but that's not one singular group of people. Neither are Gullah Geechee people one singular group of people. We covered that earlier in the conversation, to where, yes, there are people who, parts of our community that are more heavily influenced by the indigenous parts of our culture, whatever. One of which being grits. I mean, the thing that people look at as one of the blackest parts of our cuisine, indigenous people had grits.
The ground corn. The corn.
Yeah, the ground corn thing is grits. And there's, and I know a lot of people, this is tricky for a lot of people, this topic. Not all of our ties to the indigenous peoples are because we were indigenous. We did have those who were marooned, who left enslavement and communed with those people, but we also had some indigenous people who enslaved black people. And
right, like the Cherokee and every black person I move, I got Cherokee in my family. The Cherokee, okay, if you got Cherokee in your family, that's because they've been raping your ancestors. Like, honestly, I just saying.
Well, I mean, and there again, it's not a monolith. So there are some of us who are claiming lineage when in fact what we were a part of is these people were part of the tribe, and in some instances were kicked out. Like our ancestors were kicked out of the tribe because they were not seen as whole members of that community. We saw that, and so there are times some of our indigenous and some of our, so-called Indian, which, by the way, and speaking in terms of First Nation, Indigenous, and Indian, American Indian, whatever, that's not something that all of them agree on. Because if you look at it, even there are even people who are indigenous to this country who will say, "Don't call me indigenous, call me Indian." If you go to where many of them live, they'll so I just go with indigenous as a catch-all because it feels like that's probably the one that would be the least likely to offend a specific group of people or whatever. But some of those people do go by, Indian as well, and some of them call themselves Black Indians. And so, in that instance, yes, we have held on to many of those traditions, but it's not like which parts of our culture, which parts of our community.
Right.
It's not one element. Like you say, there are people who, and we get in trouble when we say that the original people were black or this person was black. We got to keep remembering Before we get into the debate about who was black, oh, Jesus was black or Beethoven was black. Remember, once upon a time, race didn't exist. Okay.
Boy.
Colonialism, with the advent of colonialism and imperialism that brought the concept of race to the world, okay, before then, they did not call themselves black. They did not identify by race. So there are people who, by modern standards, we could probably call black, but that ain't what they identified as. So when we're talking about black Indians or black Indigenous or whether or not the Seminole or that person was black, like, no, they weren't black. They were whatever tribe they subscribed to or they identified as. But when we make it a generic sort of catch-all that they're all just like black, we're subscribing to a structure that did not apply to those people because they existed before the people who invented whiteness came along.
Right.
So we got to be careful. We got to be careful with that as well about even throwing around black, white, different these races, like throwing that around as it pertains to people who predate that concept. You see what I'm saying? And as African Americans and Black Americans or whatever, we're more subject to that system simply because they stripped away so much of our ability to identify with our ethnicity prior to slavery. But at the same time, even though we as Gullah Geechee people can identify ethnically as Gullah Geechee, we're still, by the terms of this construct, we are still black in this power structure as it pertains to this power structure. But for me, I think that the relationship with the indigenous people, I mean, let's just go ahead and get into it. I think that there are some people, quite frankly, in the community who push the Gullah people are not African at all narrative without being able to produce a lot of anthropological or historical empirical evidence of that claim. I think it's because in certain instances they're still ashamed of slavery. They're still ashamed of the bondage. They don't want to concede that at some point in time we might have been in a position of disadvantage, and they want to remove that blight from their lineage, and the only way for them to do that is to remove the Africanness. Number two, because there's also conflict with Africans in either their culture or vice versa. There's that thing because of the idea that Africans sold Africans into slavery, and the idea that, well, they don't care about us, we don't care about them, vice versa. They think we lazy, they call us, kata or whatever. And so there's that thing. So, okay, so it's like that, then okay, then we deny you too. And there's some, and that's even the whole Africans selling African, remember, it's a continent, not a country. That's very diverse.
Right.
There are people that are involved. There's Northern Africans, there's Arabs, there's a whole bunch of stuff that's happening there. In order to deal with that, to have that conversation. So it's not as simple as like, Africans sold Africans, but there's that rift that's there where you feel shunned, or you don't, you're not quite American enough for America, and you're not quite African enough for Africa. So at some point in time, it's like, okay, we'll bump y'all in, and we just could be our own thing, and that's that. And so it's a diverse collective of people who come from a broad, spectrum of backgrounds, including indigenous people of this land. And in our vocabulary, in our names, a lot of names like Shaniqua that we identify with as black names, those are actually indigenous names. Those are, names that were here, Wanda and things like that. Those are not African names. Those are many of the names that we've taken on as black names actually came from indigenous people. And so there is that. But again, it's a complicated relationship in certain aspects because there is a history that's there of black people being in bondage by some of our indigenous, brothers and sisters too, as Cornel West would say. Some of our indigenous brothers and sisters were also our
yeah. Hey, look here. Let me tell you now. Them boy tell me I can fall from the grace of from the bloodline of God because I ain't listening to what he said.
Them boy fool.
Listen, You know, and you know what it is. I make room for all of it. Even the stuff I don't agree with, I still make room for all of it because we need all that. We need the people who are level-headed. We need the people that are trying to fool up. We need everybody to contribute because what happens is when the dust settles, the cream rises to the top. Whatever, two mixed analogies, but still, when the cream rises to the top, you know, you ain't want no dusty cream, but. You know, but when the dust settles, you know, it pushes us forward. It causes us to create new things. It causes us to go in and expand and grow. And you need different voices and all of that in order for that to happen. And that's what always has been our saving grace is we literally are the product of different people who spoke different languages that were put together to be confounded by one another and forced to speak this language of English in order for the overseers to know what we're talking about. But they didn't anticipate that we would create a whole different language of our own that was deceptively akin to English, but something that we could make use of separately from them. And so for that matter, to answer the question, I want to make sure, because I got long-winded like my daddy. He's a preacher. So I want to make sure that I make sure that I answer the question specifically. Is number one, in regards of teaching other people the language, I think that you have to utilize discernment, but make sure that you have a right to express your culture however you see fit. Just try to do right by us and be honorable and not just, throw the baby out with the bathwater. But if you have an opportunity to be able to forward the culture and be a beacon of light and push the culture forward, then absolutely knock yourself out. As it pertains to our indigenous roots and how much of that those cultures, we've preserved, it's not a monolith. We are not, and neither are they. So there's different elements of our culture that have intersected, some of which we were in on the ground floor as some of the original occupants of this land. And then there are those that we've come together under the unfortunate system of slavery. But at the same time, yes, even in sharing those same spaces, we have influenced them and they have been influenced us, and we have held on to a lot of those traditions.
Right. So another question them boy had, and I think we got time for either one or two more. Linda Bradley said, how do other African Americans find out whether they have Gullah Geechee ancestry? Is that kind of like, well, I ain't gonna say Native Americans, because ain't Native American ancestry dealing really with politics? There's not really a blood test you can take.
You know what the thing is, as far as ancestry is concerned, ancestry doesn't really tell people what they think it does. You can tell, like, say for example, if you're from a particular region, your family's from a particular region, and what they're telling you is that many of you, at one point in time, many of your family came from this particular area. Now just imagine, we know we got white people in the area where we're from. Okay, right. So what if a white person takes an ancestry test, and it says, oh, I from my family from Walmart Island too, I must be Gullah Geechee. We're from the same region as you guys.
They could have been an enslaver. They could have been an enslaver of Gullah Geechee.
Right. We might be from the same area, but not from the same side of the whip. But that's the thing is, and so you can know generally like where your genes have pulled geographically, where you have been and spent time in your family lineage, where they have spent time. But there's not like a Gullah gene. You see what I'm saying? Like you can't look under a microscope and say, okay, yeah, this one here is Gullah, that one's Jamaican, that one right there Bahamian. Like you can't, there's no gene for Gullah. So you have to go back to ethnicity and lineage, where your family has been, and because there's a lived experience, a component of lived experience to being Gullah Geechee. KJ Kearney, KJ, gave a really great answer when I interviewed him a long time ago. And KJ, I'm trust me, that interview going to be published, where he was referring to if you're making a certain type of champagne or a certain type of wine or a certain type of cheese, that has to be from that region in order to be that thing. In order for it to be Gouda, or in order for it to be champagne, or in order for it to be that, it is from that specific part of France or that specific part of Italy, because there's something in that process in that region that makes that thing authentic. And so when you see at a store provolone that costs $8 next to provolone that costs $2.50, take a wild guess which one. You know what I mean? When you see that big whale, which one from where?
Yeah,
And so, and his point is, you might have, you might have, you dumb. You might have. As he would say, you might have sparkling wine, but that ain't champagne.
Right.
And so, I want to be really careful when I say this. You can show that your family may have come from a particular region, but that can't necessarily tell you what their state of business was at that region. Like what were they doing in that area? Now there is a chance that if in the event that you can show that you're Black from the corridor, that's where your family and everything were, then yeah, you probably did descend from Gullah Geechee people, depending on the region of the area where they descend. But unfortunately, there's not like a Gullah gene. So the way that we've been essentially distinguishing who is and isn't Gullah Geechee is family. Any Gullah Geechee person knows if you run into anybody, especially your elder, there's a whole greeting. They won't know who your people is.
Who your people
who
is?
Now you say, hey, now who marry you? Who pay you? Like who's mother? Who's your mother? Who's your father? And so they want to know who pay you because they're trying to find out what the tie-in, what your tie-in to the land and the area is. How far back do you go? What are your roots in this specific space? Now, it gets tricky because there are people whose mama or daddy or grandmama or granddaddy are from the region and they're not. But they came back to the region either at some point in their life, they came back to the region and they basically are a Kamya. And some people will ask me, can a Kamya ever cross over to a Benya? Well, that's not possible because Benya literally means that you've been here. Not that you came here, but you literally, you know what I'm saying? So you can't really do that. But now I want to be careful. Being a Kamya with family roots, Gullah Geechee roots, doesn't mean like you're a second-class Gullah Geechee person. There ain't no rank that because you a Benya and this one's a Kamya that you ain't got no legit ties to the community or whatever. It can mean that depending on how you carry yourself, but it's not inherently a ranking system. It's just a question of designating who came from where and what your ties are to the community. And quite frankly, there are people who are known Gullah Geechee advocates whose family are not from here at all. They moved here and became a face of Gullah Geechee. And then there are those whose family are from here and they weren't originally from here. They moved here and have been here for a while and are embraced like a Benya because they have taken on the identity. And then there are those who are full on, are completely disconnected from the culture and no family or anything like that or whatever. They just have a strong appreciation for it, but you know how we do. If you've been here long enough, you done eat at my table long enough, we done, tarry with one another long enough, you in the fold. So we can bring you into the fold if we so choose to, but unfortunately there's no way to like prove that you are genetically Gullah Geechee. A lot of that goes back to your association, your affiliation, your roots in the land,
especially by your last name. I think last name would help because I know like anytime I run into a Black person named Page, they always ask me if I'm related to the Pages on Johns Island. I have no idea, but could be because ain't nobody else around here with the last name Page. So I would say
right, but and you know what the thing is, what's kind of wild about that is the concept of names in the Gullah Geechee community is wild because we know where you get the names from.
Right, the plantation, because all the Middletons
Right.
and Draytons and people around here.
Right. You know where you know where you got it from. And hold on, I want to point out something. If this light go off, it could get real dark real quick. If this because like the light, yeah, the light I use is battery powered. I ain't even think to look to see.
The ancestors telling us to wrap it up.
I'm a juice.
All right, hey, real quick though, last one, man, and you ain't got to answer if you ain't want to. I barely understand this one. It said, what is the political importance of the corridor for the future?
But how you supposed to know that?
No. Actually, that actually I can't answer that. I think that now more than ever, I'm glad. As a matter of fact, I'm glad they asked that because it's not just the corridor, but the political importance of Gullah Geechee language and culture altogether. I think now more than ever, at this time, at this juncture in this country, Black voices are being amplified. Black causes, Black lives are being uplifted, and people, even people who are not Gullah Geechee, are looking for ways to express themselves and be ethnically rooted and really find our like blackity blackness. And I think that it's one of those things in our Africanness and reconnect with our Africanness. This is something we've done before when we started blowing our hair out in afros and wearing Afrocentric garments during the 60s and during the 70s. We've done this before, and this time around, the thing that we are doing is not simply some generic thing. It's not some concept that was created by someone else and given to us. It's not us reaching out for something that doesn't belong to us. Gullah Geechee, if you're looking to dig into your roots and your Africanness, and you're one of the people who have come through, your family came through the corridor, maybe they moved and went somewhere else, and came through the corridor, and you want to rediscover your roots and you want to find out different parts of your culture and see how it's been done, because we did it. The Gullah Wars, we fought for our liberation. We've done it. We've held on to our culture. We know what it's like to hold on to aspects of your Blackness and your language in a hostile environment. The blueprint that you're looking for to help move Black people as a collective forward has been laid down in the Gullah Geechee community. So I would encourage more people, more Black people who are not even from the corridor, to study the corridor, to engage with Gullah Geechee people, to learn more about the history, because the thing that we're trying to do as Black people in many ways has been done as Gullah Geechee people. We still got a long way to go, of course, but many of those things, like when Kanye West said 400 years of slavery, that sounded like a choice to me. We just allowed them to do this and let them do that. Nah, bro, speak for yourself, because Gullah Geechee people been fighting for liberation. And so to me, the political value of Gullah Geechee culture, language, heritage, things like that is, it is the Black voice that we are looking for. It is the defiance. It is the rebellion. It is the refusal to sound the way them boy want us to sound. It is the refusal to acquiesce to their more Eurocentric ways and have an Afrocentric tie-in. When you start getting into that grammar structure, you start getting into the way that we utilize those words and the accent that still sound so similar to the way we sound in Sierra Leone, and those tie-ins and those cultural roots, and that how that jollof rice and our red rice, and how we're really holding on to that one part dish traditions, and the way that we weave those black baskets. At this instance, in this juncture, when Blackness in and of itself is at a premium, and we're looking for to lay our roots down, there's a saying in the Black the Gullah Geechee community, for heal a tree, you must take care of the root. And this is the root. This is the first Black community that really laid its root down in this country and established a culture of our own with the Gullah Geechee people. And so if you're looking for the blueprint, if you're looking for a voice, if you're looking for a megaphone to amplify your own voice and really know more about what it likes to be a survivor and rebellious in this white power structure, and survive against all odds, Gullah Geechee people and Gullah Geechee culture, Gullah Geechee history, language is the way to go about doing that. And on top of that, there are things that you can then tap into that ain't for conversation like this in public spaces. Right. You see what I'm saying? So that'll give you access to those conversations and those people and those things you wouldn't even recognize from the outside looking in, because we don't broadcast everything. for
You're not supposed
everybody.
to. No.
You see what I'm saying? So
Supposed
yeah,
to.
that is we are not separate from black people in the sense of our blackness. This is just for speaking in regards of our ethnicity, but our ethnicity can actually be a guideline and a point of inspiration for everybody black.
Oh, cool. You got anything else, babe?
No, that been it, man. I appreciate you, son,
Hey,
coming
son.
through, man, breaking them down for us, for all us, man.
Mm-hmm.
Hey,
Appreciate
son.
it.
Them boy mouth been ready for this thing, boy. Hey, when you get a chance,
Yeah.
go through them comments, man. We gonna get up and chit chat for a little bit.
Yeah, and make sure
Yeah, do
y'all
that.
boy follow him, man, on Instagram. We didn't tag him in all the little posts we put up. So if y'all know what, I can't find it, just look on our page. Make sure y'all follow
Right.
son. Tell them boy, man, if y'all want to learn more about, Gullah Geechee language, that's the guy y'all need to be following. Straight
For
up.
real, in depth.
Right.
In
For
depth.
And
real.
I want to make sure like people know that at the end of the day, what's most important, I cannot impress upon you more than anything, is I want Gullah Geechee people to stop seeking validation. You don't need to do that no more. You valid. You don't have to prove no. From now on, we done had the title of the show be why Gullah Geechee, why Gullah is a language, not a slang. From now on, we ain't got to say that no more. We done established that. From now on, let's just talk our talk. Chat there, and do what we do. No more. We ain't a slang. We ain't a this and we ain't. I ain't gonna. Don't worry about what we ain't. This is what we is. And so start speaking, using affirmative language. Start speaking positive, affirmative language. Stop talking about what we ain't and start showcasing what we are. Be encouraged. Take a stand for who we are instead of constantly fighting against who we not, because that's how they steal your energy and get you to divert your energy and playing defense so much that you forget to play offense to win. We ain't playing to not lose. We playing to win. So that's why I'm saying is, man, y'all boy, just take care of yourself, man. Put your root down and do that thing. You already know where he is. We out here. Oh, and also for real now, follow me on Instagram because I done starting to get some more troll over there. I need some more energy. I need some fresh blood over there on Instagram because y'all boy let the man look here, boy. A couple of them boy didn't get loose. Ain't nobody said nothing but me. I said, man, y'all supposed to ride on them. But then and then they gonna leave you talk about Trump 2020. I'm like, man, so it's like that. Y'all boy can just boy. So yeah, come. So hit me up at SUNNMCHEAUX. Sunnmcheax. That's at Sunnmcheax on Instagram, at Sunnmcheax on Twitter. I already tap out on Facebook, but you can follow me on Facebook anyway. But definitely hit me up on Twitter and Instagram at Sunnmcheax. Y'all already know where he is. We out here.
Hey, holla at you, Baba.
Boy.
Yeah, y'all boy got me sweating at nighttime, boy. Look at that.
Good, man. Good.
Yeah, it's time to go. All my tea going, my tea water up.
Yeah, look here, boy. I'm about to go get my little crab trap real quick and see what on that thing, man.
Well, we can do this bi-weekly, y'all boy.
There it is.
Hey, son, that's the thing right there, Baba. I got you, Baba. I can drop you off right there. Boom.
All right, y'all boy. That was the first one at Geechee Sunday. We can kick this off bi-weekly, y'all boy, Geechee Sunday. So make sure y'all tune in. If there's anybody y'all want us to feature, y'all can send us a little request. If he ain't full up, we probably can make it happen. But just know we're gonna do this thing bi-weekly. And I see y'all boy asking about the hoodie. Link in bio on Instagram. Go ahead, cop that. And we got t-shirts, galore. Oh, I showing my shirt like I got them on. But y'all know what I'm saying. Link in bio. Appreciate y'all boy, man, for tuning in. Chris, any last words you want to say? He got to get his crab before them boy teeth him.
Hey, I'm about to go, man. I got my thing tied off, man. Love y'all, boy. I appreciate everybody for tuning in. Share this thing. And we'll see y'all on the next one.
All right, y'all boy.